A simple act of kindness can change a life forever. When a young maid's daughter gives what little she has to help a stranger, she unknowingly steps into a world of wealth, secrets, and life-altering surprises. Ronnie awoke to the soft patter of rain against the tin roof of their small home. The smell of damp earth drifted through the open window, mingling with the faint aroma of her mother's tea. She rubbed her eyes and stretched, her small frame already eager for the day. Life had never been easy for her and her mother, Mira, but Rania had a gift that poverty could never touch, a heart that felt everything too deeply. Every day was a struggle, yet she greeted it with a kind of quiet courage that made even the simplest moments shine. "Rania, breakfast is ready," Mira called from the tiny kitchen. The smell of boiled eggs and flatbread filled the cramped room. Rania ran to the table, careful not to spill her cup of tea, and greeted her mother with a shy smile. Their conversation was light, filled with small updates about the day ahead. Mira spoke about the chores she had lined up, about the laundry at the neighbor's house, about the errands she needed to run. Rania listened, nodding, but her mind wandered to the school books stacked neatly on her small desk, worn corners and all. She had dreams, simple, humble ones, but they were dreams she clung to fiercely. By mid-morning, Rania had finished her chores and set out to walk to school. The rain had turned the streets into slick rivers, puddles forming in every hollow. She held her tattered umbrella, careful to keep her shoes dry. On the way, she noticed the people she passed with an almost invisible attentiveness. The old man struggling with a heavy basket, the child crying over a lost toy, the street vendor wiping raindrops from her fruit stall. Rania saw them all. Her mother had taught her that noticing others, really noticing them, was just as important as noticing yourself. "The world is full of people who forget to see each other," Mira had said. "Don't be one of them." And then she saw her, the elderly woman trying to board the bus, her frail hand clutching a worn-out purse. The woman's coins spilled onto the muddy street, bouncing into puddles, and she bent awkwardly to pick them up. Rania's heart clenched. She could feel the woman's worry and embarrassment as if it were her own. Without thinking twice, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the few coins she had saved for pencils and a new notebook. "Here," she said, holding them out. "Take these. You can pay the fare." Her voice was soft but certain. The woman looked at Rania with wide, astonished eyes. She hesitated, shaking her head. "I can't." "You shouldn't," she murmured, her voice fragile. But Rania insisted, pressing the coins into her hand with a gentle smile. "It's okay. Really, I want to help." In that instant, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. The rain falling around them, the bus waiting impatiently, and a silent understanding passing between their eyes. The woman's lips curved into a faint, warm smile. "Thank you, dear. You don't know how much this means." Rania watched as the woman climbed onto the bus, carefully gripping the coins and her handbag. The doors closed with a soft thud, and she was gone. The encounter lasted barely a minute, yet Rania felt it echoing in her chest. She had given without expectation, a simple gesture born of instinct, and in return, she had felt something like a quiet connection with a stranger. The rest of her walk to school was filled with a strange, bubbling excitement, a warmth that had nothing to do with the tea she drank or the sunlight breaking through the clouds. Back home, Mira noticed the sparkle in Rania's eyes. "What happened?" she asked, curious. Rania shook her head, smiling faintly. "Just someone needed help. I gave her what I could." Mira's lips pressed together in a quiet smile, pride and concern mingling. "You have a good heart, Beta. Always remember to protect it, too." Rania nodded, feeling a little taller, a little braver, as if the rain had washed away not just the dust of the streets, but some invisible weight she had carried all her life. The rest of the day passed in the usual rhythm of school and homework. Yet Rania kept thinking about the woman. There was something in her eyes, something in the way she had accepted the coins that lingered like a faint perfume. She imagined a woman smiling at home, counting the coins, or perhaps sharing the story with someone. And without realizing it, Rania had begun to understand a truth that Mira had always whispered in moments like this. Small actions, even unnoticed ones, have the power to ripple far beyond what we can see. Meanwhile, the elderly woman, Mrs. Farah, returned home to her sprawling city estate. The mansion was quiet, the halls echoing with a loneliness that wealth could not fill. Her staff moved efficiently, attending to every need, yet her heart felt unexpectedly light. The coins in her hand were insignificant to her, yet the gesture had touched her profoundly. Here was a girl, not even a teenager, willing to give what little she had without question, without judgment. Mrs. Farah thought about her own life. The isolation, the constant expectation, the loneliness behind the luxury. In that brief exchange, she saw a purity she had almost forgotten existed. Rania, unaware of the ripple she had set in motion, finished her day with her friends, laughing over small jokes, sharing snacks, and exchanging whispered secrets. She went to bed that night thinking about pencils, notebooks, and lessons learned, never imagining that a world of unimaginable wealth and opportunity was already turning its gaze toward her. The night wrapped the small town in quiet, and Rania's dreams were filled with rain, smiles, and the faint echo of a stranger's grateful voice. It was the beginning of something neither of them could yet understand, a story that would stretch across worlds separated by wealth, by circumstance, by age, yet joined by the fragile thread of human kindness. Rania's mother peeked into her room, watching her daughter sleep. She felt a mixture of relief and worry, pride and fear. Life had been hard, yet here was her daughter, radiant in spirit, untouched by bitterness. "May your heart always stay this pure," she whispered, brushing a strand of hair from Rania's face. Outside, the rain slowed to a gentle drizzle, leaving the earth soft and glistening, a mirror to the small yet profound change that had occurred that morning. One simple act, unnoticed by most, had set in motion a chain of events that would alter lives, connect hearts, and reveal the extraordinary power hidden within ordinary kindness. In the quiet of that night, the world seemed vast, filled with possibilities. And in her small home, Rania slept peacefully, unaware that the tiny gesture of handing over a few coins would soon lead her to experiences beyond her dreams, to lessons in compassion, courage, and the remarkable ways a single act of kindness could transform everything. The following week began like any other. Rania woke early, completing her chores with the quiet diligence that had become second nature. The modest house buzzed with the usual sounds, the kettle whistling on the stove, Mira sweeping the small courtyard, the soft chatter of neighbors outside. Yet, despite the routine, Rania felt an unusual restlessness, a flutter in her chest she couldn't quite name. Perhaps it was the memory of the old woman on the bus, or perhaps deep down she sensed that something was about to change. The knock at the door came mid-morning. It was firm but polite, echoing strangely against the bare walls. Mira answered, broom in hand, and stopped dead at the sight of the sleek, black limousine parked outside. Her eyes widened, heart hammering. "Rania, do you see that?" she whispered, disbelief mingling with fear. She turned back to the door just as a woman stepped down from the car, dressed elegantly, her posture graceful yet relaxed. It was the same elderly woman from the bus, the woman Rania had helped. Rania's jaw dropped. She stared at Mrs. Farah, her mind scrambling to make sense of the sudden appearance. It's you," she stammered, barely able to form words. Mrs. Farah smiled gently, extending a gloved hand. "Yes, it's me. May I come in?" Mira hesitated, suspicion shadowing her face. Her life had taught her to be cautious, to expect the worst from strangers. Yet something in Rania's eyes, wide with wonder, filled with innocence, nudged her toward trust. She stepped aside, gesturing for Mrs. Farah to enter Dot inside. The modest home seemed to shrink in comparison to the grandiosity the limousine implied. Mrs. Farah's eyes took in every detail, yet her focus remained on Rania. She spoke softly, deliberately, as if each word carried weight. I have been thinking about you since that day on the bus. Your kindness, it is rare. I would like to invite you to spend the week with me in the city. There are experiences I wish to share with you, lessons you might learn, opportunities you may never have dreamed of. Rania felt her heart leap into her throat. A week in a mansion? With a real billionaire? The words spun around her like a dream she didn't want to wake from. I don't know what to say, she whispered, the reality of the offer pressing heavily against her chest. Her mind raced with questions. Would she be out of place? Would she be accepted? Yet beneath the fear, excitement shimmered, warm and unstoppable. Mira, still wary, finally spoke. Why her? Why my daughter? Her voice trembled, balancing curiosity and caution. Mrs. Farah's eyes softened, reflecting years of experience, loneliness, and a rare vulnerability. Because she has a heart untouched by cynicism, a spirit willing to give without expectation. That is a treasure I wish to nurture, not for my sake, but for hers and for the world she will touch. After moments of stunned silence, Mira allowed herself to nod. Her daughter's eyes sparkled, and she saw the hope, the courage, the possibility of a future far beyond the narrow boundaries of their modest existence. Rania, if this is what you want, she said gently, I will trust you. But promise me you will stay safe. Be careful. Rania hugged her mother tightly, the unspoken bond between them strengthened by this extraordinary moment. I promise, she whispered. Feeling the weight of responsibility and the thrill of adventure entwined. Traveling to the city was a revelation. The limousine moved smoothly through streets lined with bustling shops, honking cars, and towering buildings that seemed to scrape the clouds. Rania pressed her face against the window, her eyes wide with awe. Everything was unfamiliar yet intoxicating, the bright lights reflecting off wet streets, the chatter of people with lives so different from hers, the smell of coffee and exhaust and rain mingling in a heady mixture. She felt both small and infinite at once, as if the world had expanded in ways she could hardly comprehend. Upon arrival, Mrs. Farah's mansion rose before them like a vision. Its marble floors gleamed despite the drizzle. Massive windows framed manicured gardens, and the grandeur of it all left Rania speechless. She walked through halls adorned with art, sculptures, and gleaming chandeliers, absorbing every detail with a mixture of awe and humility. Every corner whispered stories of wealth, discipline, and solitude. Yet Mrs. Farah's presence made the mansion feel less imposing. She guided Rania gently, narrating memories, lessons, and philosophies hidden behind the glittering facade. Rania listened intently, feeling herself drawn into a world she had never known, one that shimmered with beauty but carried weight beneath its perfection. Over the next few days, Rania navigated a whirlwind of new experiences. She met staff who moved with quiet precision, each interaction teaching her subtle lessons in etiquette, respect, and empathy. She explored gardens that stretched farther than her eyes could follow, visited kitchens where meals were prepared with exacting care, and wandered libraries filled with books she had only ever dreamed of touching. Each encounter challenged her understanding of life, some with wonder, some with discomfort. She realized that behind every polished surface was a story, a struggle, a loneliness that wealth could never fully erase. Yet amidst the luxury, Rania's humility never wavered. She asked questions with curiosity, not judgment. She noticed the staff, the unseen labor behind every glittering artifact. She laughed, stumbled, and sometimes fell out of place. But each misstep became a lesson, each smile a bridge between worlds. Mrs. Farah watched her with a mixture of pride and reflection, recognizing the courage it took for a girl so young, so unpolished, to navigate such unfamiliar territory without losing herself. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Rania sat with Mrs. Farah in a quiet sitting room. Rain tapped lightly against the windows, the sound a gentle reminder of the day she had first helped her. "You've changed my life," Mrs. Farah said softly, her voice carrying warmth and sincerity. "And you may not even realize it. Sometimes the smallest acts, an offered coin, a kind word, carry ripples farther than we can ever see." Rania, overwhelmed, could only nod, feeling the weight and beauty of the words. She understood that her actions had meaning, that her heart had power, and that this week was not just a gift, but a turning point in her journey. The week unfolded with laughter, reflection, and discovery. Rania learned that wealth was more than possessions. It was opportunity, responsibility, and influence. She discovered that human connection transcended social status, that kindness and humility could break barriers invisible to the eye. And while she marveled at the splendor around her, she never forgot the modest home, the mother who had nurtured her, and the values that had guided her to this extraordinary moment. Each day was a delicate balance between awe and authenticity, wonder and groundedness, luxury and the simple truths of her heart dot by the end of the week. Rania had grown in ways even she could not fully articulate. She had navigated unfamiliar worlds, learned lessons about wealth, responsibility, and empathy, and forged a bond with Mrs. Farah that bridged age, status, and life experience. The experience left her humbled yet emboldened, curious yet reflective. She had glimpsed the power of generosity, the weight of opportunity, and the importance of staying true to one's values amidst dazzling distraction. As she prepared to return home, Rania felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. She was eager to embrace her ordinary life again, to return to her mother, her school, her neighborhood, but she also carried something new, a vision of what life could be, not just in comfort, but in purpose, compassion, and courage. Mrs. Farah's gift was more than a week in a mansion. It was a mirror, showing Rania the potential that lay within her own heart. The limousine ride back to their small home was quiet, filled with unspoken reflection. Rania gazed out at the rain-washed streets, her mind replaying the week's lessons, the faces she had met, the conversations that had lingered in her heart. She realized that life was fragile, beautiful, and profoundly interconnected, and that her actions, no matter how small, could ripple in ways she could never predict. And as the modest rooftops of her neighborhood came into view, she felt a swell of gratitude and determination. Her journey had only just begun, but she was ready. Rania stepped into the mansion once more, this time with a quiet confidence she hadn't felt before. The familiar echo of polished marble greeted her, but it no longer felt intimidating. Instead, it seemed like a world that had been waiting for her to understand it. Not just its luxury, but its complexity, its hidden currents of responsibility and care. Mrs. Farah was waiting in the library, seated in a high-backed chair, a soft throw over her lap. Her eyes, sharp yet kind, lit up as she saw Rania approach. "Welcome back, dear. Are you ready to see more of the world behind these walls?" she asked, her voice carrying a warmth that made the vast room feel intimate. Rania nodded, clutching her bag tightly. She had learned that every room, every hallway, carried a story, and she wanted to understand them all. Mrs. Farah began the day with a tour of her philanthropic projects. Schools, clinics, shelters, places Rania had only heard of but never imagined visiting. She saw children learning in classrooms that had everything her own school lacked: doctors tending to patients without hesitation, and volunteers giving their time selflessly. Rania's heart swelled with a mixture of awe and humility. She realized that wealth, when paired with responsibility, could ripple out into lives far beyond the reach of any single person. And yet, she also noticed the careful planning behind every effort, the precision, the management, the burden of accountability. This world was not simply luxurious. It was deliberate, structured, and sometimes lonely. During their visits, Rania asked questions. She wanted to know why Mrs. Farah focused on certain projects, why some initiatives succeeded while others faltered. She noticed the staff, the quiet ones who labored without recognition, and she spoke with them, learning stories of dedication, hardship, and pride. Each conversation added layers to her understanding, showing her that life's value was measured not just in comfort or wealth, but in empathy, effort, and connection. Mrs. Farah watched silently, pleased and reflective, seeing the young girl absorbing lessons far deeper than surface appearances. One afternoon, Rania and Mrs. Farah sat in the garden, the air fragrant with blooming flowers. The city skyline shimmered in the distance, but the garden felt like a world apart. Mrs. Farah spoke softly. "Rania, do you understand why I chose to help you?" Rania shook her head, her curiosity piqued. "Because you reminded me of a time when I believed in the world without conditions. I forgot that innocence, that willingness to give without thinking of return. You showed me that it still exists and it matters." Rania listened, her chest tight with emotion. She understood in that moment that kindness was not just for the recipient, it was transformative for the giver. 2. The days passed with lessons that were both practical and profound. Rania learned how to manage simple projects, to organize small efforts that created meaningful results. She discovered the delicate balance between authority and compassion, responsibility and humility. She met other young people who had access to wealth but lacked understanding of its power, and she found herself bridging gaps with curiosity and warmth. Mrs. Farah guided her gently, never imposing, always letting Rania observe, question, and reflect. Each experience was a revelation, showing the girl that life was a series of choices, each with consequences, each with potential to change the lives of others. Evenings were quieter, filled with stories and reflection. Rania would sit with Mrs. Farah by the fireplace, listening to tales of the woman's youth, of triumphs and regrets, of moments when wealth had failed to soothe the heart. These stories were not lectures, they were windows into a life lived with both power and loneliness. Rania asked questions, sometimes hesitating, sometimes boldly, and Mrs. Farah answered with honesty. They spoke of fear, of loss, of the courage it took to act with integrity in a world that often rewarded indifference. Rania realized that her simple life had prepared her for this in ways she hadn't appreciated: resilience, empathy, and an unwavering sense of right and wrong. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Rania and Mrs. Farah visited a local orphanage supported by the Billionaire's Foundation. The children there were wary at first, eyes wide with suspicion, but Rania's gentle smile, her willingness to kneel and speak to them, broke barriers immediately. She shared stories of her own struggles, her laughter mixing with theirs, creating a bridge between worlds separated by circumstance. Mrs. Farah observed silently, heart swelling with quiet pride. In that moment, she knew that her decision to bring Rania into her world had created something enduring, an example, a spark, a reminder that compassion could transcend wealth, status, and age. Rania's humility never faltered. Even when she was faced with the opulence of the mansion and the grandeur of Mrs. Farah's life, she asked about paintings, books, and antiques not for their price, but for their history, the stories behind them. She noticed the hidden labor of staff, the small acts that kept everything running smoothly, and she offered help wherever she could, whether it was carrying a tray or arranging flowers. Each gesture was met with quiet acknowledgement, yet it mattered. Rania was learning that generosity was not measured in currency alone, but in attention, care, and the willingness to see others dot as the week progressed. A bond formed between the two women that was unlike any Rania had ever experienced. Mrs. Farah shared wisdom, not as authority, but as a companion guiding a young mind. Rania offered perspective, reminding the older woman of the simplicity and honesty that often eluded her in a life of calculated decisions. Together, they laughed, pondered, and sometimes sat in companionable silence, understanding each other in ways that transcended words. This connection was subtle, yet profound, and it left Rania with a sense of belonging she had never known in the world of wealth, and Mrs. Farah with a warmth she hadn't felt in decades, dot by the final day of her stay. Rania understood that her week had been more than an introduction to wealth. It had been a masterclass in humanity. She had witnessed the power of generosity, the weight of responsibility, and the necessity of humility. She had seen that kindness could be a force that changes lives, that courage could bridge gaps between worlds, and that the heart's strength was often the most valuable asset of all. Mrs. Farah, observing the girl's transformation, realized that she had found more than a visitor. She had found someone who reflected the best of her own forgotten ideals. The night before Rania was to return home, they walked the mansion gardens together, the moonlight casting silver shadows over the flowers. "Remember, Rania," Mrs. Farah said softly, "you have the power to influence, to inspire, to change lives not through wealth, but through heart. Never forget that." Rania nodded, feeling the gravity of her words, a mixture of awe, hope, and determination coursing through her young body. She knew her journey had only just begun, but she felt ready, strengthened by knowledge, love, and the subtle guidance of someone who saw in her a reflection of what the world could be at its best dot in the quiet moments before sleep. Rania reflected on the week's lessons. She realized that life was an intricate balance of giving and receiving, learning and teaching, leading and following. She had been immersed in a world that could have overwhelmed her, but instead it had taught her resilience, compassion, and the profound impact of one kind heart. As she closed her eyes, she understood that this chapter of her life was not just a memory, it was a foundation. And foundations built on love and integrity could support a life filled with possibility, purpose, and joy. The week had passed faster than Rania could comprehend. The mansion, once a dazzling labyrinth of grandeur and mystery, had become familiar, its halls echoing with laughter, conversations, and quiet reflections. Yet now, as the time to leave approached, a heavy sense of finality settled over her chest. She had grown, learned, and discovered a depth within herself she had never known existed. But returning home meant leaving behind a world that had stretched her, imagination and heart in ways unimaginable. Mrs. Farah greeted her that morning with a warm smile. Yet there was an unmistakable hint of gravity in her eyes. "Rania," she said softly, "your journey does not end here. What you have learned, what you have given, must travel with you. The world you return to is waiting for your light." Rania nodded, understanding the weight behind the words. Her heart thumped with a mix of excitement, anxiety, and gratitude. She felt a strange blend of awe for the life she was leaving behind and a burning desire to bring something of it into her own world. The limousine carried them back through the city, the familiar sights of tall buildings, bustling streets, and neon lights passing in a blur. Rania pressed her face to the glass, reflecting on every lesson, every conversation, every small revelation from the past week. She thought of the children at the orphanage, the staff she had quietly assisted, The stories Mrs. Furra had shared about responsibility, kindness, and resilience. Each memory felt like a seed planted deep within her heart, ready to grow in ways she could not yet imagine. When they arrived at her small neighborhood, the contrast was striking. The modest homes, narrow streets, and simple lives of the people around her seemed even more vivid after the week of opulence she had experienced. Rania felt a strange sense of homecoming, a deep appreciation for her roots. Yet she also carried the knowledge of what was possible. She understood that the world could be larger, brighter, and more compassionate if people chose to act with intention and heart. Rania's mother waited anxiously outside, her eyes scanning the street until they landed on the limousine. Fear and hope wrestled across her face. When Rania stepped out, she ran into her mother's arms, holding tight as tears threatened to spill. "I missed you," Mira whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "And I'm proud of you," she added as they stood in the quiet street, rain-washed and shimmering. Rania felt the truth of those words deep in her chest. She had missed this simple life, yet she had also grown into someone who could bridge two worlds without losing herself. Inside their small home, Rania recounted her experiences, careful to balance awe with humility. She spoke of the lessons learned, the kindness witnessed, the responsibility understood, and the empathy that had deepened. Her mother listened intently, pride and wonder reflecting in her eyes. "You've changed," Mira said softly, a mixture of relief and admiration in her tone. "But not in the way that matters to the world. It's your heart, your courage, your willingness to see and act. That will guide you far more than wealth ever could." Rania nodded, the truth of her mother's words resonating deeply. She had glimpsed a world beyond the limitations of her modest upbringing. Yet she understood that the values instilled in her, compassion, humility, integrity, were the foundation that made her capable of navigating it. The mansion, the gardens, the lessons, they were all gifts. But it was her heart that had allowed her to receive them fully, to learn and to grow. Days turned into weeks, yet the impact of her journey remained vibrant in Rania's mind and spirit. Mrs. Farah continued to support her quietly from a distance, providing resources for school, guidance in her studies, and occasional letters that carried wisdom and encouragement. Rania embraced these opportunities with enthusiasm, understanding that her education was not just for personal advancement, but for the ability to give back, to influence lives, and to act with conscience and purpose. One afternoon, as she walked through the neighborhood, Rania noticed the same elderly neighbors, struggling families, and children who had always been part of her world. She stopped to help, carrying groceries, offering a kind word, or simply listening. The smallest gestures seemed more meaningful now, imbued with the confidence and perspective gained from her time with Mrs. Farah. She realized that true change did not come from wealth alone, but from action, compassion, and the courage to stand for what mattered. Her friends noticed the difference in her as well. Rania carried herself with a quiet strength, her laughter still bright, but now layered with awareness and empathy. She became someone people turned to for advice, comfort, and support. She learned that influence could be subtle, that leadership could take the form of listening, encouragement, and everyday acts of care. And through it all, she remembered the woman on the bus. The coins in her hand and the ripple that had begun with such a small, heartfelt gesture. Months later, Rania's family experienced a stability they had never known. Mrs. Farah's generosity ensured that their needs were met, that Mira could rest easier, and that Rania could pursue her dreams without the weight of constant struggle. Yet the greatest gift was not financial, it was the lesson that hearts, connected through kindness, can overcome even the widest divides. Rania's experiences had given her the understanding that life's true richness came not from material possessions, but from love, empathy, and the courage to act on one's values, Rania never forgot Mrs. Farah's words. You have the power to influence, to inspire, to change lives, not through wealth, but through heart. These words became a mantra, guiding her through school, friendships, and community. She became a bridge between worlds, showing that compassion could ripple outward in ways that money alone could not achieve. And in every action, every choice, she carried the quiet confidence that even the smallest gestures, like helping a woman with bus fare, could transform destinies. One evening, as Rania sat with her mother, they reflected on the journey together. Do you remember the day we didn't have enough for school supplies? Mira asked, a nostalgic smile crossing her face. Rania laughed softly. Yes, and now look at how far we've come. Not just because of help we received, but because of what we gave. Her mother nodded, pride shining in her eyes. They understood that the journey had been about more than wealth or opportunity. It had been about heart, resilience, and the choices that define a life. Rania's life continued to evolve, yet she remained grounded. She excelled in her studies, nurtured relationships in her community, and carried a quiet sense of purpose. Every decision she made, every small act of kindness, reflected the lessons she had learned, the responsibility of power, the importance of empathy, and the enduring truth that one heart can make a difference in countless lives. The ripple of that small act on the bus had become a river of change, flowing far beyond her imagination, touching hearts, and shaping futures. As she lay in bed one night, Rania thought of Mrs. Farah, of the children at the orphanage, and of the many people whose lives intersected with hers because of one small act of kindness. Gratitude filled her chest, a warmth that reached into every corner of her being. She understood that life was an ongoing journey, a tapestry of choices, lessons, and opportunities to act with heart. And with that understanding, she drifted into sleep, ready to continue a life shaped by compassion, courage, and unwavering hope. Rania's journey had come full circle. From the small, rain-soaked streets where she first offered coins to a struggling stranger, to the vast halls of a mansion, to the quiet strength she now carried in her daily life. She had learned that true wealth was measured not in possessions, but in the capacity to care, to act, and to inspire. And in every heart she touched, the ripple of kindness continued, proving that one small gesture could indeed change the course of countless lives.